The steady rhythm of my mop against the polished floor was almost meditative. 3 years as a janitor at Montgomery Industries, one of the city's biggest tech firms. 3 years of scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, and existing in the periphery, and I was fine with that, really. But tonight was different. Tonight, the company was celebrating its 25th anniversary, and for the first time, every employee, janitorial staff included, was required to attend. "You have to go, Nathan," my supervisor had insisted. Direct orders from the CEO herself. The CEO, my sister, Sarah. The same sister who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, not since she married Richard Blackwood, heir to a wealthy business empire. The same sister who pretended we were strangers whenever we passed in the halls. I adjusted the collar of my ill-fitting rental suit, catching my reflection in the restroom mirror. At 32, I looked older than I should. Life had been relentless since our parents died, leaving us nothing but debt. Sarah had Richard's family to help her through college. I had a mop and sheer determination. The grand ballroom glittered with extravagance, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over champagne glasses and designer gowns. I lingered near the edges of the crowd, nursing a glass of water, trying to blend into the wallpaper. "Nathan, didn't expect to see you here." I turned to find Mark from accounting, one of the few who treated me like more than background noise. He'd even offered to help me with my business classes at the community college. "Mandatory attendance," I said with a shrug. "Glad you came. Did you ever finish that financial analysis project we talked about?" Before I could answer, a familiar laugh cut through the crowd. Sarah had arrived. Draped in a sleek red designer dress, dark hair swept into an elegant updo, she commanded the room effortlessly. Richard stood beside her, flanked by board members. And then, her gaze landed on me. She smirked. "Oh, look, even the janitors cleaned up tonight." Laughter rippled through her circle. I kept my expression neutral, my grip tightening around the glass. "Nothing new." "Sarah," Richard drawled, amusement in his voice, "don't be cruel. I'm sure. What was your name again?" He looked at me with thinly veiled disdain. "Nathan," I said, voice even. "Nathan Crawford." For the briefest second, Sarah's smile faltered. "Crawford?" she echoed, turning back to the board members. "Oh, what a coincidence. That's my maiden name too." A light chuckle. "No relation, of course. Can you imagine? A CEO's brother working as a janitor? That would be embarrassing." More laughter. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Actually, I started," but Sarah cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I mean, really, some people just lack ambition, don't they? Content to stay at the bottom, cleaning up after their betters." Something inside me snapped. 5 years of silence. 5 years of pretending. 5 years of watching her climb while stepping over me. I set my glass down deliberately. "You're right, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "It would be embarrassing to have a janitor for a brother. Almost as embarrassing as having a sister who denies her own family to protect her image." Silence crashed over the room. Sarah's perfect smile froze. Richard's mouth opened, but I beat him to it. I pulled off my name badge, tossing it onto the nearest table. "Don't bother with security, I quit." I turned, ready to leave with my dignity intact. But then, a deep voice cut through the stunned silence. "Now, why would my best undercover analyst want to quit?" The room collectively turned. Alexander Montgomery himself stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane, a bemused glint in his eyes. Sarah paled. "You, undercover analyst?" Montgomery stepped forward. "Oh yes, Nathan has been my eyes and ears in this company for the past 3 years. His reports on employee treatment, corporate culture, and inefficiencies have been invaluable, especially his observations on nepotism in upper management." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Sarah's grip on Richard's arm tightened. But he's a janitor," she managed weakly. "A janitor who's been attending business school at night," Montgomery corrected, "who graduated top of his class last month. A janitor who uncovered the accounting irregularities in the Pacific Division, saving us millions." His gaze sharpened. "Tell me, Sarah, did you ever wonder who left those anonymous tips that made you look so good in front of the board?" I stood frozen as he placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "That would be your brother," he said, emphasizing the word. "The same brother you've spent 5 years pretending doesn't exist." Sarah's flawless mask cracked. Around us, the laughter had long since died. Now, the board members regarded her with renewed scrutiny. "Mr. Montgomery," I began, but he held up a hand. Nathan, the promotion. I think it's time we moved you to your real office, Montgomery said, his tone light but firm, the one next to mine. After all, my new chief operations officer needs to be close by. A sharp crack echoed through the ballroom. Sarah's champagne glass had slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. The next morning, Montgomery Industries buzzed with whispers. The janitor turned COO, the story spread like wildfire through every department. But I wasn't there to hear it. I was in my new office, a spacious corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, trying to process how my life had changed in just 12 hours. Montgomery strolled in without knocking, a small smirk on his face. Your new suits will be arriving this afternoon, Mr. Crawford, he said. Can't have my COO wearing rentals now, can we? I stood, still adjusting to the reality of it all. Mr. Montgomery. I have to ask, why me? Why the undercover operation? He settled into one of the leather chairs across from me, his eyes sharp but warm. When I started this company, I was a janitor's son. Nobody took me seriously, but I learned something valuable. The people who clean your offices know more about your company than any consultant ever will. He leaned forward. 3 years ago, when Sarah took over, things started changing, and not for the better. Morale dropped, good employees left. Then I saw you, her brother, applying for a janitorial position. I was curious. So you tested me, I murmured. Every single day, he confirmed, and you exceeded every expectation. He tapped his tablet, pulling up reports. Your analysis of operational inefficiencies was brilliant. Your proposals for employee welfare, cost-effective and humane. But most importantly, you showed integrity. Even when Sarah treated you like nothing, you never sought revenge. A sharp knock interrupted us. Sarah stood in the doorway. She looked different, less polished, more human. Her usual perfect composure was cracked, her designer suit slightly rumpled, her eyes rimmed red. Nathan, she caught herself, straightening. Mr. Crawford, the board requests your presence in the conference room. Montgomery's expression darkened. Funny, no one informed me of a board meeting. It's an emergency session, Sarah said stiffly, avoiding his gaze. A warning flared in my gut. Something wasn't right. The trap. The entire board was assembled when we entered. Richard sat among them, smug and composed. Mr. Crawford, one of the board members began, while your undercover work was impressive, we have concerns about your qualifications for such a senior position. Richard leaned forward, his voice smooth. Specifically, your lack of executive experience. Sarah slid a folder across the table. These documents outline several incidents during your tenure here, she said, regaining some of her old confidence. I opened it. Fabricated maintenance reports, complaints I had never seen, even photos of messes staged to look like negligence on my part. Furthermore, Sarah added, there are questions about unauthorized access to company files during your time as a janitor. I didn't react. Instead, I glanced at Montgomery. He was smiling. That wasn't good, for them. Interesting timing, Sarah, he mused. Tell me, when exactly did you compile this documentation? We've been tracking these incidents for some time, she replied. Really? Montgomery's tone was almost amused, because according to the metadata, these digital files were created between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. this morning. The tension in the room shifted. Montgomery pulled out his own folder. Now, let's look at some real documentation. He distributed copies. Internal emails, surveillance footage, financial records. Proof of systematic discrimination against lower-level employees. Evidence of unauthorized bonuses. Manipulated performance reviews. And then, he delivered the final blow. And here, he said, setting down one last document, is proof that Sarah has been selling company secrets to our competitors. Silence. Then, chaos. Sarah shot to her feet, her face draining of color. That's a lie, Richard, tell them. But Richard was already shifting, edging toward the exit. His confidence had evaporated. Montgomery's voice cut through the noise. The FBI has been provided with everything. They're likely arresting Richard's contact at TechCorp as we speak. Right on cue, 2 men in suits entered, flashing their badges. Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood, you need to come with us. As they took Sarah by the arm, she turned to me, her face crumbling. Nathan, please, we're family. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. Now you remember? Her lip trembled. I was scared. 5 years too late, Sarah. They led her away. And just like that, she was gone. 6 months later, the boardroom was silent as Montgomery cleared his throat. Now then, let's discuss the company's new direction under our COO's leadership. He glanced at me, approval in his eyes. I believe Nathan has some fascinating proposals regarding employee advancement programs. I nodded and opened my laptop, pulling up a presentation I'd been refining for years. And as I spoke, outlining a vision where every employee, from janitor to executive, had a path to grow, learn, and succeed, I felt the weight of the past finally lift. Sarah had chosen power over family. And in the end, she lost both. But the day wasn't over yet. And the biggest surprise was still to come. From rags to riches to redemption, Sarah and Richard's trial made national headlines. CEO siblings, from rags to riches to redemption. The corporate espionage charges were serious, but what truly captivated the public was the family drama. A janitor turned COO exposing his corrupt sister? It was the kind of story people couldn't resist. But I had no time to revel in the spectacle. I threw myself into rebuilding Montgomery Industries. The employee advancement program became my greatest achievement, offering education assistance, mentorship, and clear paths to promotion for everyone, from maintenance workers to middle management. Mark from accounting, once overlooked, now led our new financial transparency initiative. Things were changing. And yet, some nights, alone in my penthouse, I'd find myself staring at old photos. Mom and Dad at Sarah's college graduation. Sarah holding my hand on my first day of school. Where had it all gone wrong? Then came the call I had been dreading. An unexpected visitor, Mr. Crawford. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Your sister's attorney is here. I exhaled, steeling myself. When Sarah walked in, I barely recognized her. Prison had stripped away the polish, gone were the designer suits and flawless posture. Instead, she sat with her shoulders hunched, hands twisting nervously in her lap. Nathan, she whispered, I know I don't deserve to be here. I kept my voice neutral. Why are you here, Sarah? She swallowed hard. I'm being released next week, early, for cooperation. Her fingers trembled. Richard, he was the one selling the bigger secrets. I just wanted to prove myself to his family. They always made me feel like the poor girl who got lucky. I let the words hang in the air before responding. So you decided to make everyone else feel small instead? Tears welled in her eyes. I lost myself, Nathan, somewhere between marrying Richard and becoming CEO. I forgot who I was, who we were. She reached into her purse, pulling out an old, creased photo. Us as kids, me, about 7, her 12, building a snowman in front of our tiny rental house. Remember what you said when I told you I wanted to be rich and famous one day? I did. We'll do it together. Sarah let out a broken laugh. You were always the smart one, the kind one. I was just better at pretending. She wiped her face. Richard's family disowned me. The divorce papers came through last week. I have nothing left. Not everything. Montgomery's voice filled the room. Neither of us had heard him enter. Sarah stiffened. Sir. He waved her off. Miss Crawford, I believe you're using your maiden name again? She nodded. Montgomery walked to my desk, placing a folder between us. Your brother has shown me something remarkable these past 6 months, not just his business sense, but his belief in second chances. I stiffened. I hadn't told Sarah about this part of the program yet. Nathan's employee advancement program has a unique initiative, Montgomery continued. Rehabilitation opportunities for white-collar offenders, entry-level positions, strict oversight, but a real chance to rebuild. Sarah's breath hitched as she reached for the document. You mean? There's an opening in the mailroom, I said quietly. 6-month probationary period, mandatory ethics training, regular mentorship check-ins. She hesitated. Who would be my mentor? I met her gaze. Me. Her composure shattered. Not the elegant, controlled tears of the old Sarah, the ones designed to manipulate and deceive. But real sobs, deep, raw, the kind that only come when you've hit rock bottom, and find an unexpected hand reaching down to pull you back up. Montgomery slipped out, leaving us alone. For the first time in 5 years, I moved around the desk and hugged my sister. I don't deserve this, she whispered against my shoulder. Maybe not, I admitted, but that's what family does. We lift each other up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. 1 year later, The company newsletter sat on my desk, featuring an article about our rehabilitation program. Sarah's photo was there, smiling genuinely, as she mentored a new participant. She had worked her way up to program coordinator in record time. Her story, both a warning and an inspiration. Last week, Montgomery announced his retirement. Yesterday, the board approved his successor. Me. The janitor's son, becoming CEO. The media loved the story. But what mattered most sat in a small frame on my desk. 2 photos. The old one, Sarah and me, building a snowman. And a new one, from the company picnic, us building a sandcastle, laughing with employees' kids. A knock at the door. Ready for the board meeting? Sarah poked her head in, holding a stack of reports. I smiled, just thinking about how far we've come. She hesitated, then stepped forward, together. Like I always said. As we walked to the conference room, employees greeted us warmly. No whispers. No judgment. No pretense. Just 2 siblings who had lost their way, and found it again. From his office, Montgomery watched, satisfaction in his wise old eyes. His legacy wasn't just about profits or innovation. It was about second chances. Redemption. And the power of keeping your humanity, even at the top. You know what, little brother? Sarah said as we reached the conference room. I finally feel rich, really rich. She smiled. And it has nothing to do with money. I squeezed her shoulder. Me too, sis. Me too.